Hi, I'm Sean and I'm 20. Look at me. Do you think I'm a good or a bad person? Do not jump to conclusions. The way someone looks can be deceptive. I didn't know what I was like until recently, but then there was one thing that put everything in its place. Subscribe to the channel while I tell you my story. Well, I studied in a college and rented an apartment. My parents lived in another state. I had a very ordinary life. We were together with Tessa and studied together. I spent evenings with friends. All my weekends I stayed in the apartment and watched TV shows or played computer games. But one day, something happened that disturbed my peaceful lifestyle. It was Sunday as usual. I was playing Doom when I looked out the window. There was a house nearby. I spied on the neighbors sometimes over there. Suddenly, I saw a girl in the opposite window. She immediately caught my attention. The fact is that she was changing her clothes. I immediately stopped the game and stared at her. The girl was very pretty, and I really wanted to look into her face. At some point, she turned around and, no way, it was Jillian. I packed and hid so she wouldn't see me and began to think, how could she be there? The thing is, I dated Julian in high school. We were together for a year, but then I got bored and left her alone. She seemed very bitter about me, but I didn't feel guilty. I didn't promise her anything. I started to date another girl real soon and didn't talk to Julian until the end of school. So I went to another city. The college began, and all of a sudden, I see my ex in the opposite window. How could this happen? I just stared at her. Julian has changed a lot since high school. She was gorgeous. For the rest of the day, my thoughts were only about her, and sometimes I watched what she was doing in her apartment. I was sure that my ex was still upset with me, but she wouldn't like to see me, and she certainly wouldn't talk to me. So I tried very hard not to run into her on the street. It was not easy as our buildings were next to each other, and the front doors faced the same street. It was not good for a while, but one day I slipped up and ran into her. "Sean, is that you?" she asked cheerfully. I had to admit that I was her neighbor. To my surprise, she didn't look upset at all. In fact, she seemed glad to see me. We chatted for a while and even recalled our high school time together. "I was so stupid that I fell madly in love with you," she laughed. But I wasn't laughing. At that moment, I realized that I still had feelings for her, and now they had flared up again. I shouldn't have left her at school, but maybe I still have a chance? Julian left, and I couldn't stop thinking about her. I saw my girlfriend that night. I didn't tell her anything about my new neighbor. Tessa was telling me things all the night, but I didn't listen to her. I kept thinking about Julian. "Hey, Sean, what's wrong with you?" she finally asked. I lied that I had a headache and wanted to be alone. I actually felt like I didn't want to spend any more time with her, but I couldn't admit it to her yet. When I got home, I just stuck to the window and watched Julian. I liked everything about her. How she was at the computer, how she danced alone in the room, how she was having her breakfast. Of course, she didn't know I was watching her, but that made me like her even more. But one day, I made a mistake. I forgot to close the door to my apartment and didn't notice when Tessa showed up. I was watching Julian hungrily in the opposite window. Of course, my girlfriend immediately made a scene. "So that's what you're doing when I'm gone?" she screamed. I realized that this was the right time to leave her, so I told Tessa that it was over between us and I didn't want to see her again. She looked at me with disappointment and said, "You know, Sean, you're a very bad person. You make the people around you suffer." She left, and I continued to watch Julian. Now that I was alone, I had even more confidence and thought she should have to be mine. So I started hitting on her. I was waiting for her outside the house, complimenting her, and presented some expensive gifts. To do this, however, I had to borrow a large sum, but I didn't regret it because Julian deserved all of it. I started skipping class and was spending more and more time hanging out with my neighbor. Then one day, I found her, chatting with another guy. It was completely unexpected because Julian hadn't said anything about him. This guy gave her a ride home and she kissed him gently. I was furious. That same night, I asked her, "Hey, who gave you a ride home today?" Julian replied that it was her boyfriend Derek and they had been together for 6 months. I was shattered. It turned out that I was just a friend to Julian, and she didn't see me as her boyfriend at all. I was depressed for a couple of days, but then I decided it was too early to give up, and a plan immediately popped into my head. I had to make friends with this Derek and find out some nasty things about him. After all, everyone has a dark side. I found out from Julian that her boyfriend went to a gym nearby and signed up. However, I had to borrow even more money to do this, and I almost stopped going to college. But my efforts were not in vain. At one of the training sessions, I met Derek, and we became friends in the gym. Of course, he didn't know that I knew his girlfriend and wanted to win her over. We just chatted about training and sometimes sat in a cafe after the gym. After a few weeks, Derek began to think of me as his friend. After we began to trust each other a bit, I told him my most shameful secrets, hoping that he would tell me something that I could use against him. And finally, I got it. After the next training session, as usual, we went to a cafe and began to discuss the girls, and Derek said, "I have a secret. Promise you tell no one." Here it is! I promised to keep it a secret and listened eagerly. Derek shared with me that when Julian was away on vacation with her parents, he was having fun with her best friend. He said her name and told where she was studying. Bingo! I did it! That evening, I went to Julian's house with a huge bouquet of flowers and confessed my feelings. To what, of course, she replied that she had a boyfriend. And then I said that Derek just didn't deserve a girl like her. I told her everything I had been told by her boyfriend. I told Julian the name of his friends he cheated on her with. Julian listened and was going to burst into tears, and at the end, she started crying. "I knew there was something between them," she said. I tried to comfort her, but inside I was just jubilant that everything had gone as I hoped. A couple of days later, she broke up with Derek, giving him a huge goodbye fight. I watched from my window as they were shouting and arguing, and that was what I needed. As soon as Derek left, I called Julian and invited her to a cafe. Of course, she agreed. So I started to hit on my neighbor again, comforting her after breaking up with a guy, and after a while, I finally felt like I had a chance to be her boyfriend. I was over the moon. I wasn't even bothered by the troubles in college and the large debts that needed to be paid off urgently. I was happy. Julian seemed pleased too. She wasn't crying anymore and she wasn't thinking about her ex. Once, she even decided to throw a little party to celebrate the end of a toxic relationship. She told me and invited me to her house. "Come on, Sean, only my good friends are going to come. You'll like them." Of course, I agreed. I was very pleased that I also fell into the circle of her trust. What's more, I was planning on asking Julian to be my girlfriend again at this party. It was a very important evening for me, and when I went up to her apartment on the time, Julian opened the door and I got inside. "Meet Sean, these are my friends," she said cheerfully. I turned around and it sent chills down my spine. Derek and Tessa were sitting in front of me. What were they doing here? Her ex-boyfriend and my ex-girlfriend looked up at me with a grin and wanted to see what I would do. I wished for the ground to swallow me up. Julian joined her guests and said, "It's time to end this toxic relationship. But it's you, Sean. And here's what I've got." It turned out that after I broke up with Tessa, she met Julian to warn her about me. After a while, they became friends, and when I started asking Derek for some nasty secrets, they decided to test me. Julian's boyfriend deliberately told me a fake story, which I immediately hurried to tell his girlfriend. Naturally, they did not want to think of parting apart. They only wanted to punish me. "Sean, you are a very bad person and haven't changed at all since high school. Get lost. I don't want to see you anymore," Julian told me angrily, and I left. I've never felt so ashamed before. At first, I was angry at my neighbor and her friends, but then I realized that I only need to be angry with myself in the end. After all, they were absolutely right. I am a bad person, and now I understand it. I've been thinking about it all night. The next day, I decided I'd apologize to Julian for everything I'd done. But when I looked out the window, I didn't see her anymore. There was someone else in Julian's apartment. I found out that she had moved out of the apartment right that morning. I didn't know where I could find her now. I guess what you will write in the comments, that I am bad and deserve everything that happened to me. Yes, you're right. but I want to be good. And to begin with, I want to apologize to everyone I have hurted.